Good evening, and welcome to the Raven House of Mysterious Happenings. In tonight's comic book review, we are going to look at an issue which features a very interesting team-up, that of a classic pulp detective and a famous monster of literature and movies. So, here we go. Return of the Monsters, The Phantom Detective versus Frankenstein. Now, this comic is set in New York City in 1939, and it tells the story of Richard Curtis Van Loan, a wealthy playboy who also battles crime in the city as the Phantom Detective. In this particular story, the police have an unusual case on their hands, and they send word for the Phantom Detective for his assistance. In this particular case, there is a missing scientist named Dr. Henry Cushing, who's disappeared from his lab, and the laboratory itself has some very strange equipment and some strange evidence of experiments that the doctor was doing. Once he is on the scene, the Phantom Detective is able to determine that Dr. Henry Cushing is the grandson of the infamous Dr. Victor Frankenstein, creator of the monster. And the Phantom Detective believes that maybe an organization known as the Black Sun may be behind the doctor's disappearance. In the meantime, the Frankenstein monster has arrived in New York via the sewers, and he is also looking for Dr. Cushing, though his motives are a little unclear. But it's clear that these two characters might have a common enemy. I really like this issue. I just kind of saw it in a comic shop, and it kind of intrigued me, so I picked it up. I really didn't know anything about the Phantom Detective. Obviously, though Frankenstein I did. And it's a part of a series by Moonstone called Return of the Monsters, where they were pairing up different classic pulp detectives against certain classic monsters. And I thought it was an interesting premise. And I kind of picked up this issue just because it looked intriguing. And I'm glad I did, because it really had a good, strong story. It's a one-shot. It's all in one issue, but it does have a very good story. It's really a lot of fun, and it was just a really good read. The interior artwork is really good. It's done in black and white, even though the cover is in color. But the artwork, black and white, really kind of adds to the feel that I kind of felt like I was watching a story that could have been done as a Universal monster movie back in the 1930s. Definitely with a pulp detective like the Phantom Detective, against the Frankenstein monster per se. The artwork gave it that good classic, black and white monster feel to it, which I think really kind of helped. It made it even more of a fun read. But the story is very solid and just very good. And if you're unfamiliar with the Phantom Detective, it's also a good introduction to him, and it has an interesting take on the Frankenstein monster as well. I thought the Phantom Detective was pretty interesting as a character. Being a pulp hero, he's very much in that mold of Batman and the Shadow. The fact that he's a wealthy playboy who lost both of his parents, and he's taken up this fight against crime, is very reminiscent of Batman. The police can even signal him by using a special searchlight that has a picture of his mask on it. So again, very much like Batman. But he also is not above using excessive force, particularly with the two guns that he carries, which is reminiscent of the Shadow. So he covers a lot of the basics of a pulp hero, and so he definitely was a definitely interesting character, and his look is great with the top hat and the cape and the tuxedo gives him a great look. Of course, the fact that the Phantom Detective might dress like a gentleman, he's certainly not above getting down and dirty when battling crime, both using his fists and using the gun. So he's very much a rugged character, even though he has a very kind of a gentleman detective look, which I thought was also very interesting. The story also uses the Frankenstein monster in an interesting way. He's kind of a wild card in this story because the Phantom Detective is looking for the missing doctor and dealing with this secret organization, and you're not quite sure what the monster's agenda is right away, and it kind of makes him more of a wild card. And I thought it was an interesting way to present him. It's not the Phantom Detective versus the monster. The story is a little bit more complicated than that, and I think that really works in its favor. That's a great story. Well, that's about it for my review. The Phantom Detective versus Frankenstein. Great issue. I'm glad I picked it up just for some good old-fashioned fun and pulp detective and monster elements. I'm actually curious what the other issues in this Return of the Monster series by Moonstone is like, so I might try and pick those up as well. But this issue, though, definitely could recommend it just for some good fun and just a great read, so it's definitely worth picking up. Well, that's about it. Thank you, as always, for listening.